but okay. Here we go. What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Fun with Friends podcast. I'm your host, Allie. I hope everyone is staying safe and staying sane. Joining me on today's episode is Geneva, and she's the founder of Unwrap Your Map, which is all about helping you achieve your travel goals. So we can't really travel right now, right? We can't do a whole lot of travel because of what is happening in the world, but luckily there are people that exist that can help you start preparing for when you can travel again. And Geneva is one of those people. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I'm excited to pick your brain more than I already have. I'm lucky enough I get to talk to you fairly frequently and ask you all of my travel questions, but I'm excited for you to share your travel knowledge nuggets with the rest of the Fun with Friends listeners.
Absolutely. There's nothing I'd rather be doing with these nuggets of info, to be honest. It's my personal favorite topic, so I'm looking forward to it.
I always like to kind of share a little bit about how we met, or how I've met my guest. And Geneva and I met through the same elite travel group or elite entrepreneur group that my last guest, Jazz, and I met on. We're in, and we are actually in an accountability pod together. I think that's what they were called, or like a pod or something like that. So we're essentially in a study / work group together for this kind of course that we're taking. So we get to chat pretty frequently, maybe like every other week or so, to kind of share our small business struggles and wins and to kind of help each other out however we can. It's been super nice having someone to talk with that's not only in that same group, but also is interested in and has a lot of knowledge about the travel related stuff that I want to do. So like I said, I am frequently picking Geneva's mind when it comes to, or picking your brain when it comes to travel stuff. So that's kind of how we were initially introduced to each other. And then, you know, one of the main reasons I joined the elite group was because I was looking for some pointers on running a small business and how I could kind of incorporate more travel and focus and information into what I already have going with Coots Creations. And I'm kind of curious about you, Geneva, and why you joined the group.
So yeah, I had actually just started launching my business as a travel coach. And this is my first time getting into an online-based role. And so in many ways, I had, you know, some of the foundational pieces there. But the reality was there was still so much I had to learn. And I was looking for a good network of people that were going through similar things at the same time and that would understand my struggles. And, you know, my hope was to meet new people, make some new connections, and really start learning how to, you know, kind of level up with my business. So I mostly just joined for the networking and for some practice and getting used to being online personally, because I've never been a huge social media person. So it was just a great way for me to kind of connect with other people that were going through similar things and find out how I can get some ideas and expertise from people who'd already been doing this or were doing this at the same time. So yeah, just a chance to network and meet some new faces in the travel space.
Yeah, and I think I keep saying this when I talk to people, I think one of the main benefits of that group has been the networking within the other participants. Like,
absolutely.
Just absolutely amazing women that are just doing fantastic things in the business space and the travel space. And I think we're all kind of figuring out the best way to pivot right now, especially when it comes to travel, because of
everything. Everything.
You know, the inside the end of the world, but it's not. But yeah, that's been like definitely the highlight of joining that group has been the connections that I've been able to build with other participants. So yeah, it's just been a really cool experience. So let's get to know my guest a little bit more. Geneva, tell us, or if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit more about who you are maybe a little bit about your background and what got you into travel.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting story. My family moved around a little bit growing up. I was born on the West Coast, and we lived out there for about 7 years, and then we moved to New York. And so I primarily grew up in New York, just outside of the city, actually. And I always had a dream of traveling, but I didn't really know how to make it happen. And, the reality was I grew up in an area where, there were these expectations. You go to school, you get a job, and then you get a house, settle down, and that's your life. And when I was 18, I had the opportunity to go move out of state for college. So I went to university down in Virginia. And then it was during my years in Virginia that I got the opportunity to study abroad at one point. And it seemed like a great idea because, the cost of a semester abroad was exactly the same as a cost of semester at my uni anyway. So I thought, well, why not? This is a great chance. And so I went abroad, and it's hilarious. Looking back, I brought a huge, ridiculous suitcase with me, which is nonsense. Now I'm so embarrassed with my 20-year-old self for taking this big old bag with me, all for my semester in Italy, right? And looking back, well, we'll get to that. But basically, that was my first time spending, a couple months abroad. And it was a really neat experience, but I wanted so much more out of travel and out of seeing the world. And I just didn't know how to make it happen. And so when I graduated from university, my idea was to get a job with a company that would hopefully be able to relocate me at some point. And I had actually been a fashion major in school. And there was one US-based retailer that was sending store managers abroad to help open new stores. So I went to work for them in hopes that I could get relocated with them. Mm-hmm. And after 2 years of working for them, I worked my way up to a promotion. And they said, we're actually not going to do this program anymore. We're phasing out the international relocation.
No way.
Yeah, and that had been my goal. I was like, well, how am I going to move abroad if this job can't take me there anymore? What do I just start this whole process over with another company? And it was at that point that my lease was coming to an end and everything was kind of hitting a turning point. And I thought, I can at least figure out how to travel Europe on my own. And if I just go do that, come back, and then I'll settle down and get a real job. So I took my savings, I sold all my stuff, I gave up my apartment, I quit my job, and I packed up my car. I drove back up to New York, dropped everything off with my parents, and I said, I'm going to Europe. I'll be back in a couple months after I've spent all my money, and then I'll, get it together again. I'll get the real job and I'll do the adult thing. And yeah, that's the beginning of the story, basically. That's when everything changed. When I went to Europe, that was definitely the beginning of my full travel story. So long story short, that turned into 6 years of adventuring, basically.
I don't know, the guts it takes to do something like that, like, especially at kind of, I don't know. I never would have been able to do that when I was in my 20s. Like it was so, I think people our age, it's ingrained in us, right? Like you were saying, you go to school, you get a job, and you work until you die. Like that's what we're taught essentially growing up.
Yeah.
And that was so ingrained in me that, the thought of like selling everything and just going abroad at that time in my life, I never would have had the guts to do it at all.
It took a lot, to be honest. And I wouldn't even say that I had the guts when it happened. Like, I don't even think I had the guts at that time. Kind of the way it happened was so strange, actually. And when I would tell people, I had actually met someone online. I met a girl online through a travel community. And this was far before there were some of the big ones that there are now. But early days online communities for travel and forums and things online. I actually met another girl who was interested in doing a Euro trip at the same time. And we started exchanging emails. And that's kind of how I got the confidence to go, if other people are going to do this, I can probably do this too. And it took a lot of baby steps to get there. But
that moment where you're like, fuck it, I'm selling everything. I'm going to Europe. I'll be back sometime in the future. That kicked off 6 years of living abroad, right? That was
that was the start of 6 years. And it, I never knew it was going to turn into that, but that's exactly what happened. It was very organic, actually.
And that entire time, that was continuous travel. Like you never like came home and did like a pit stop or like touched home base or.
No, I did come back. Over the course of 6 years, I actually came back to the US 4 times. The first time was after my Euro trip because I thought that was going to be it. So I spent all my money in Europe. And it was when I was there that I found out about these visa opportunities. So when I came back to I already had my ticket back to the US because I knew in my mind I could only stay in Europe for 3 months on a US passport. So I just came back because I didn't know any other way. But it was when I was there that I'd learned about these visas. And so when I came back to the US, I already had it in my mind, maybe I'm just going to turn around and go right back out there. So that first time I ended up working a couple of waitressing jobs to save up and fly straight back out after about 2 months. And that was the first time I came home. And then later I came home for my brother's wedding and one for Christmas. But yeah, all in, it was 4 times I took small trips back here in between, over the course of that 6 years.
You have so many good stories and so much knowledge when it comes to like the types of visas you can get, how long you can be in a country, working, and I mean, you have 6 years of living and working abroad experience that you can share. And so in the 6 years of your travels abroad and working abroad, you've been to 45 countries and you've worked in at least 4 continents. What are some of the places that you've been?
So I tend to think in regions, and let's say, basically I did Europe all kind of at once. So I did, a big 3-month trip around Europe, in which I hit about 17 countries over the course of 3 months. But some of that was also from previous trips as well. But yeah, Europe, and then quite a bit of Southeast Asia, a little bit of the South Pacific. I've done Australia, New Zealand. I've been to Dubai, and I've covered about 5 countries in Africa as well with a good friend of mine. And I would say those are the main chunks of places over the last 6 years.
I would love to hear more about Dubai sometime.
Fun fact, Dubai I'd always been interested in going, but the only reason I actually went was because I got free flights. When Emirates first started their nonstop flight from Boston to Dubai, they were giving away a couple free tickets to celebrate that new nonstop flight. And it was quite easy to win contests back then. Let's just say, you doing things on Facebook. There was no, liking it, stories, whatever. It was literally like, if you're one of the first 10 people to sign up, you get this flight for free. And guess what? I was one of the first 10 people to sign up. So it was easy back then. But yeah, I got free round trip flights to Dubai just because I was flexible and open to when I could go and whatnot. So yeah.
Listen. Hear stories like that, like from you, Carly, who was a guest on the podcast earlier, when her friend won that trip to Croatia for freaking Yacht Week. Like, I hear these stories and I'm like, what am I doing wrong with my life? Like, I need to be more on top of like signing up for free shit or for competitions because like I get a free flight to freaking Dubai.
I think it's just about taking a chance sometimes. You've got nothing to lose by just trying. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned a lot in this process. It's easy to look at something and say, oh, well, that's not going to happen. What are the chances? Well, they might not be good, but you might get it. They might be exactly what you need. You never know unless you try. And I think that was one of those cases where I thought, oh, what are the chances? But when I logged in and I started going through the process, next thing I knew, well, the chances are good. I'm going to get these free flights. So never try, you never know. That's what I learned there.
How long did you get to go? How long were you in Dubai for?
I was there for 10 days. So I won the round trip flights, but I actually only used one way there. So this was when I was heading to New Zealand for my first work visa. And so I won the flights right around the time I wanted to be heading to New Zealand anyway. So I took the flight from Boston to Dubai. I stayed for about 10 days. And then I paid for my flight from Dubai to New Zealand. And I basically gave up that return trip back to Boston. Yeah. I knew I was not heading in that direction.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I gotta start signing up for more stuff. I'm always like a little weary. You know what I mean? Like,
well, especially now.
Is it real? Is it not? Like,
and they want all your information nowadays too. So it feels a lot more risky to keep putting information out there on the internet. So I can understand that.
You're like, yes, I agree to give you my firstborn child if I want to trip. I don't know. I'm very cautious about those types of things, but also hearing all these stories, I'm like, shit, have I been missing out on free travel trips my entire life? I gotta start signing up for stuff. Oh my gosh. So out of all of those, and I know this is one of the hardest questions that I ask people who do a lot of traveling, because I feel like it's like having to pick between, like if you had children and had to pick between two of them,
Your favorites.
your favorite. So I know this is a hard question, but out of all the places that you've been, what would you say are the top two that you've been to?
So I have to pick two different places for two completely different reasons. I got to pick at least one for the fun adventure side of things. And for that call, I'm going to say Myanmar. Because going to Myanmar was kind of unexpected. It ended up being, basically a border run while I was living in Cambodia and working in Cambodia. It became an easy trip out to return on a new visa. And Myanmar was such an adventure for me because I loved the scenery. I loved the landscape, the weather, everything about it. And I think what was so incredible was just visiting the historic sites there, the temples that are spread out all over Bagan. It was just incredible. And to be able to ride around on these little scooters all day and have a look at them. And when I was a kid, I was really interested in, the idea of visiting these ancient places and ancient structures. And that was, for me, the closest I feel like I've ever got to that dream that I had as a kid. And, obviously I never decided to study those areas, but it's become fun to have the chance to explore. And then I would say on the other side of that, as far as a place that I could see myself living, that I love enough to go back over and over and over again, that would be New Zealand. I have fallen in love with the scenery, the mountains, and that's a place where you can drive for, I don't know, 6 hours in a day and see so many different kinds of landscape all in one day that it's just been a mind-blowing country to visit and explore. And I've absolutely loved going to New Zealand. I've actually been 3 times now, and I was supposed to go back before COVID, but 2020 happened, but that's okay. I love New Zealand, and I would say that's more from a living perspective, whereas Myanmar would be from an adventure and exciting travel experience kind of thing.
I could definitely see why people would want to stay.
They both have some incredible opportunities. And I feel like that was the first time that, there was a lot of places I'd traveled where I thought, oh, this is a really beautiful country and I love being here and exploring, but I don't know that I could live here. And New Zealand and Australia are both countries where I said, no, I could definitely live here. This is, these are amazing countries. The work-life balance is phenomenal. The people are very relaxed and laid back, and it just creates a nice, comfortable environment and the kind of place that you can see yourself living and enjoying life without having it be so different from what you know and love about your home country, for example.
If you're like me and you're just getting started with podcasting, it can be scary and overwhelming. That's why Anchor is such a great choice. It's one of the easiest ways to make a podcast, and best of all, it's free. It also has great creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Another great feature of Anchor is that they'll distribute your podcast for you. Your listeners will be able to access your podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. You can also make money from your podcast using Anchor, and that's with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, and it's easy to use. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
One of the other things, this is kind of a fun fact, I guess, and it's something that I'm excited to talk about for several different reasons. One of which is just the fact that you get to claim this title, and that is that you have this unofficial claim to fame as the most organized backpacker. And as someone who always overpacks, always, whether it's for a week or a month or for an undetermined amount of time, I'm like, how many suitcases can I take? You told me a story about how you lived out of one backpack essentially for 6 years, and it literally blew my mind because I cannot comprehend how a person can do that. So I just want to hear more about kind of your top backpacking and packing tips that you have.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that I want to say to that. First off, I would say I've probably always had an element of that inside me. I was kind of I'm from a family of 5, and whenever we were taking small family trips during summers and things like that, I was the designated car packer. I was really good at just looking at something spatially and saying, this will fit here, this will fit there, and maximizing on a small space, really. So I was always the one responsible for packing up the family car if we were going somewhere. So I think a lot of it came from there, my practice in my years as a kid, packing the car for the family trip. But yeah, I think what a lot of it comes down to is when you start living with less, you realize how much less you need in life, really. And once you've had some experience living with less, you just kind of find that you need less, and it becomes easier to pare down on things over time. But definitely, I have a background in retail, obviously, and so I became quite good at folding things perfectly. And again, with my spatial organization, when you find designated places to put things and specific ways that things fit in specific places, you kind of develop a system. And what I would say to a lot of people is, once you're packing a bag for the first time, for example, find a place for things. And then once you find that place, you'll probably shuffle it around in the first couple of weeks that you're moving around. But once you find where things work and fit nicely, make that those designated places and always put the exact same things in the exact same place. You'll never lose anything. You'll never wonder where anything is. Everything will be exactly where it's supposed to be. And I think that makes it really easy when you're constantly changing your home, for example, if your passport's always in the same place, if your, dirty laundry is always in the same pocket, and if you're, stuff like that, I think really helps make it easier over time. But especially, separating things into either little packing cubes or cloth baggies or something. I basically, when I worked retail, we would get these shoe bags that were little cloth drawstring bags, and we just had a whole ton of them in the stock room. And when I left, they just said, "Oh, take however many you want." And so I took a stash of about 10 of them, and I basically took a Sharpie and labeled each one of them. One was S for socks, one was I don't know, F for flip flops, and I just kind of labeled each bag, and those items would go inside those bags. And so you could pull out entire bags of things and get exactly what you needed, put it right back where it was. And then definitely always getting a front loading backpack is a really great way to almost feel like you have a suitcase when you're moving around permanently. You can just kind of unzip that front flap, pull out exactly what you need, use it, and when you're done, put it straight back in there. And then if everything's got a place, if everything fits nicely, and you get a system down, and over time, if you stick to that system, I find it's quite easy to keep living out of a backpack, really.
I don't know. My brain does definitely not work in the same way, because I'm like, oh, if I have cubes and bags for everything, that means I can bring more stuff.
Less is more. Less is definitely more. And I think another thing people struggle with is wanting to bring everything in terms of clothing. But, I'm very, let's say, frugal. I'm careful with my spends, but I spend good money on good things. And what I always look for, if I need something before I trip, I will always try and find something that is practical in a number of uses. So I've got one raincoat that I'll take with me everywhere I go. I don't travel with an umbrella. I haven't used an umbrella, I don't know, ever. But I always travel with a raincoat, and I make sure it's one that has a hood. And I've picked one that can also look nice enough that I can wear it out on a night out, for example. But I can also wear it if I go hiking, and picking a pair of shoes that works for a little bit of everything. Something that you can go, that's sturdy enough to go hiking in, but that you can also wear to the gym. You can go for a run or a walk. One good pair of flip-flops that can get wet, so that you can wear it in the shower. You can wear it, a sturdy pair that you can wear on hikes, like small hikes. And then with clothing, picking a kind of set color scheme that's very flexible and just sticking to those colors, whether it's navy, gray, black, or, maroon and white. You just pick your couple of colors, and from a fashionable perspective, if you stick to those, you can reuse everything with everything and find combinations galore, and basically creating a capsule wardrobe is a good way to do that.
Don't do any of those things. Like when I went to Scotland, they were like, pack light, because sometimes you got to haul around your own shit. Like, we're not always going to be there to carry your suitcase for you to and from the bus. And I was like, dope, I can handle that. But I ended up taking like a full-size suitcase for a 10-day trip, and I packed it to the max. Like, because I was like, well, it's going to be cold some days. Sometimes it's not going to be cold. I got to take sweaters. I got to take jeans. I took like 4 pairs of shoes. I think I wore like the same pair of shoes the entire time I was there. And there were people on the trip who had just like their carry-on suitcase. My brain just cannot comprehend how that works.
I tell you, if you try it once, you have to push yourself to try it once. And if you have someone to help you through that first time doing it, when you go on the trip, when you are literally carrying less around with you, that comfort level of not, literally not having the weight, but also having to lug things and, pick things up every time you're going up steps or whatever else, you'll grow to appreciate, having less with you. And it will make sense then going forward to always want to have less on these trips. If that makes sense.
I think I to be like that, because when I did archaeology, it was like you were on the road, like popping around from like dig to dig, and so you lived out of your car. So I had like one suitcase and like a tote, and that was my life for years. But at some point, I think it's because I've become more like settled.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, and I have like my comfort items and like material things that I don't necessarily need, but it's like, oh, but I want this, and it brings me comfort. So now I have it, and that has translated into like my packing style. And so yeah, I don't know, but what I do know is one of the things I'm looking forward to. So for the listeners, we'll talk about travel coaching here in a little bit, but Geneva is actually going to be my travel coach and advisor for my trip to Ireland, which I will, be going for an undetermined amount of time. And I think one of the things I'm the most excited about is implementing some of these packing tools, because it is definitely an area that I need help in, because if it were just up to me, I'd literally take probably two full-size suitcases and like everything I had with me, because it's a comfort thing, I guess. I don't know, but I'm very much looking forward to just having like a backpack with my shit in it and like living life in a backpack. I'm looking forward to it. I just need to figure out how to get to that point.
Yes, there's definitely something very freeing about it as well. And I think once people do it, they become attached to this feeling like, I have everything with me. I can just pick up easily and go somewhere if I want to go somewhere. And I think that when you start noticing that you have that ability, there's something that makes travel more enjoyable that way. When it's not a big mission to pack everything up and move. You can just do it like that. You can do it in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's not some big mission to repack everything. I never unpack when I get somewhere, unless I'm staying for an extended period of time. I don't unpack. I literally leave everything in my bag, take out what I need, put it back when I'm done. And yeah, you'll get a system down. Don't worry.
I'm so that. I think it's like a comfort thing, because I'm like, as soon as I get to a hotel, I'm like, I'm gonna unpack everything, put it in its place. I'm excited for us to get into that part of the whole trip. And so something else that besides being a like superstar packer, something else that you've really perfected over the years is working abroad, which I think is another topic that a lot of people are interested in, because again, speaking, from my own personal experience, I literally know nothing about working abroad. And when I try to find information about it, it's kind of scary, because the first thing you usually see is like, oh, you need this paperwork, this visa, this blah, blah, blah. And it's very overwhelming. And I feel like you have a way of kind of making that information useful, I guess, and like easily understandable in a way that is not found on the internet. So what's some advice or tips that you have for people that are looking to travel, that might also be looking to kind of incorporate some working abroad opportunities? And then can you also share a little bit about what your experience has been working abroad, and kind of what some of the odd jobs are that you've had?
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the most important things is understanding where you have options for visas, because those are always going to be your best bet for finding, solid job opportunities, paid job opportunities, and, the eligibility to base yourself there, living properly, working properly, earning a local based income. So knowing what your visa options are is one thing. And I realize that that's a very tricky, process to navigate for anyone who's new at this, which is why a travel coach, and myself in particular, that's what my focus is to help people understand their visa options and things like that. But that being said, there's a lot of places that you can still find ways to kind of work. And I put that in quotation marks because basically sometimes it's for pay, sometimes it's not for pay, but these options are ways that you can keep your travels going. So I always tell people to be open-minded and think about their skills, think about their expertise, because me personally, there's a lot of travelers out there who have digital-based jobs, they're digital nomads, they work from their laptops. I've traveled for 6 years not doing any of that, hardly spending any time. I didn't travel with a laptop. Half the time I didn't even have a phone that worked properly. I didn't do any of that. But I've met travelers along the way doing all different kinds of things. And I've found, like I said, locally based jobs where I had visa options, but in times where I didn't, I would maximize on working in exchange for accommodation, or, you can do these working opportunities where you work on a farm in exchange for your housing and your food. There's also people I've met who take their skills from home and they basically sell them and advertise them abroad, and you don't need a visa to do these kinds of things. I mean, obviously you have to keep them somewhat under the radar, but I've paid another backpacker to cut my hair for me because he was a hairdresser back home. I've met tattoo artists who make a living while they travel. I've met artists who sell their work on the streets in certain places, whether it's Europe or Australia, New Zealand. They'll sell their photography or their creative goods on the street or through online marketing. They'll let someone know they're coming to the area and they will say, I'll be here, I'll be doing this. If anyone needs my services, let's get in touch. So there's ways to maximize on what you know how to do when you're traveling in places where you don't have legal working rights. And that's just a great way to kind of bring in a little extra income. But definitely knowing where you have these options is always super helpful, because those are going to be your big bread and butter opportunities to make money for more travel. But I would definitely say, last but not least, leveraging on your connections is a great way to find out about other work opportunities, because you meet so many amazing people when you're traveling. And sometimes those people can lead you to other job opportunities in other countries that can keep your travels going. And the reality is that was part of my situation as well. My job in Cambodia, I found through a friend I met when I was living and working in Australia, and he's from the Netherlands. So those are three different countries that all came together in the picture, and that all contributed to part of my experience abroad over those years. And working in these countries is definitely different. I would say my experience in New Zealand and Australia was, mostly minimum wage jobs, moving around from place to place. I did work as a store manager when I was in New Zealand, and so I was mostly based in one place there. But in Australia, I moved around. I worked in a coffee shop. I worked in the outback for a little bit. But then moving to Cambodia was a completely different experience working abroad. I mean, that was like nothing I'd ever done before. It was in an area that was totally unusual to me. I mean, I'd traveled in Southeast Asia, but I'd not lived there. So, living in an area that, it's considered developing nations and third world countries is quite different, obviously, than living in Australia or New Zealand or the US or Europe. So there's the whole cultural aspect that you have to kind of be willing to adjust to. And it's part of the experience, and it's what makes it so amazing. And I've loved all these experiences for different things, but I would definitely say that being flexible and being open-minded is what will make all of these experiences worth it in the long run, whether you're working legally or just, on the fly with your creative genius, whatever it may be. But there are always different ways to do this. And I think being willing to try new things is an important part of finding these opportunities, but also an important part of the personal growth that you'll experience on the way in having been in these places and tried these new things that you maybe would have never otherwise expected to do. So definitely worth it, I think.
It makes me feel a little more comfortable knowing that there are so many different options out there to kind of keep to have a little bit of money coming in while traveling for extended periods of time. Because that's definitely something that I think about with my upcoming trip to Ireland and how to make all that work. And that's another aspect of your travel coaching that I'm looking forward to kind of digging in a little bit more, because you've already helped me quite a bit with like connecting with different groups and finding people that are already in those areas and, kind of, yeah, like you said, working and connecting with people that can help share information and connect you with other people and just building that whole network.
It can be very overwhelming, honestly, and I think that's why I put it off for as long as I did. After college, I went to work in the US because I didn't know the other ways to do this, and I would do the research, and at the time, there was a lot less information out there back then, but even then, it was even what you found was overwhelming because of the terminology they used and the way it was laid out. It just made it very confusing for someone who, didn't speak the language. And a lot of times these websites that you're dealing with, um, they're, a lot of times it's not quite in the same language that we would use. And so it's quite difficult sometimes to understand the best way to do these things. And I think my role in becoming a travel coach, my idea behind it was to create the kind of role really that I could have used when I was first looking to travel, however many years ago, because I knew I was struggling to find the right information in a way that I could understand it. And so that's what I want to be for people. I want to be able to be that bit of information, a person that they can talk to and have a conversation with instead of just reading pages upon pages of information that's listed in ways that are really complicated to understand. I mean, at this point, I know what some of the good options are and some of the, different alternatives as well. And so I think a lot of it helps to sometimes be able to talk to somebody that's done these things already, because the websites can be very confusing, very overwhelming, and yeah.
100%. 100%. As a travel coach, your goal is really to help others that might be daydreaming or thinking about traveling, to start taking steps so that they can turn that like dream into a reality. So you're really looking at, okay, so you want to work abroad. We'll use Australia just because it's at the top of my mind right now. We've been talking about it a lot. So you're there to really help coach them through what steps they need to take and to like really break down the process for how they can make that a reality.
A lot of what I want to help people with is kind of pulling their inner strength and really getting the confidence they need to actually take these steps, to book flights, to pack their bags, to get on the plane, to go, because a lot of times it's great to think about this and it's great to look at pictures of people who've done this and think, wow, I'd love to do that as well. But to actually take the steps on your own to make that happen can be very overwhelming, really. And a lot of times it's easy to talk about it and yeah, I want to, I really want to, and one day, later. But the reality is that can become an endless cycle of laters, and at some point the question is, are you going to do this or not? And it can be really hard to make that happen, to actually make the choices to say, no, I am going to do this. I am booking my flight. I am getting ready for this trip. I'm going to make everything happen that I need to make happen so I can go. And I think a lot of that comes down to sometimes not having the confidence in ourselves, not feeling like we're capable, or just concern about, am I going to be able to do this all right? How am I going to meet people? What am I really going to do when I'm over there? And so I think besides the visas and things, what I want people to know is that they can do this, that you don't need to be, thinking 10 levels ahead of where you are right now. You can do it now. You don't need to wait until that moment when you feel like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I've got all the money I need. Because money is not the issue most of the times. A lot of people will say, I want more money for this trip. And don't get me wrong, it brings a level of security. But the reality is, a lot of times we just have to have the courage in ourselves to take that step, to book that flight, to get on that plane. And I want people to know they're capable of all these things. And they're going to be so capable of getting over there and chasing all their dreams abroad. And I want them to know it's not as hard as they might think it is. It's actually quite easy. And it's once they get out there and do it, they'll realize, oh, geez, I can't believe I waited as long as I did, And, meeting people, making connections abroad is one of the best parts of the experience. And I want people to know how making friends abroad can be so much different than making friends at home, and how you don't need to be worried about, whether or not you're going to meet people abroad, because there will always be options. And budgeting is another thing. Like I said, a lot of people are worried about money, but the reality is that there are ways to make your money work for you while you're away, and to also work for your money, and that works two ways. And there's so many different ways to manage your finances when you're abroad so that you can keep going if that's what you want to do. And sometimes it's just helpful to, in this case, talk to a coach, talk to someone who's done this before. So, we can help you out and let you know what your options are and how you can make this work and how not to overthink it, really. So yeah, that's a lot of what my goals are with this.
I've said this multiple times throughout this podcast, but I personally can vouch for your coaching skills, because I think you might have been the first person that I reached out to when I was like, man, I found this ticket to Ireland. I'm really thinking about it. I was like, I don't know though. And you were like, do it. And that was really all I needed. It was like, I just needed someone to tell me that it was okay for me to like make that move, because I'm very analytical. Like, I think about all those things you just mentioned. I think about, am I going to run out of money? Do I have enough money to go? And, like, we just had a conversation about, like, I'm a little worried that I might get like lonely over there. Like, I might not have friends. And you were like, okay, well, this is how you can rectify that. Like, check out hostels, start contacting people before you go. And like, had all these great tips for how to kind of make that transition easier. And it's just having someone to kind of like tell you that it's okay. Having someone else tell you that makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I mean, the buildup is part of the fun, having something, you always have that once you plan it or start planning, you have that trip to look forward to, but the stuff that happens in the meantime can be really exciting as well. Starting to make connections with people, realizing that there's going to be events locally that you can get involved in to try and make it easier to start connecting with groups of people from the minute you arrive. And yeah, I just think, getting your bearings when you first get to the place is a great segue into, moving into your own place there. If you're going to be house sitting, for example, or if you want to find your own apartment, if you're planning to stay for a while, there's always ways to kind of segue into your new comfort zone in a new place. And a lot of times that involves getting involved with locals and meeting people. And there are ways to start doing that ahead of time now, which is really cool because, when I first started traveling, these Facebook groups weren't as prevalent as they are now. And, there's so many ways now to maximize on the internet really, and make these experiences more comfortable and more, achievable. And I just think they're they make the process easier, really.
And we're back. So we are going to do a speed round of questions with Geneva. And to start with, let's see, what question do I want to start with? If you could hop on a plane tomorrow and go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Oh, that's really tricky. Oh my goodness.
That's a surprise one.
Oh, it depends on so many different things. Mongolia is coming to mind, so I'm going to say Mongolia because I've just always wanted to go to Mongolia, so why not?
Good answer. There's a wrong answer to that question. Okay, next question. What is one of your favorite things about traveling?
Hands down, meeting the people. I have made my best friends in life right now are all friends I've made during my travels. And I honestly, meeting people is the best part of the experience, if you ask me. You make some incredible lifelong friends through traveling, and you're totally hanging out with a group of people that have similar interests and priorities in life. And it's just, friendships happen at hyperspeed, and it's incredible. And I absolutely have loved meeting people along my journeys. And that's what's kept me traveling as long as I have, quite honestly. It's just been the people.
Another great answer. Let's see. We already did this one, I think, earlier, which was like, what are some of your favorite favorite places that you've been to? And you said Australia and where was
New Zealand and Myanmar, yeah.
Yes, Myanmar. So, what is the most adventurous activity or trip that you've gone on recently?
Recently, well, let's say the most adventurous activity I've done on one of my most adventurous recent trips was bungee jumping in Africa over Victoria Falls.
Oh my God.
That was incredible. So I've been bungee jumping twice now, once in New Zealand and once in Africa, and I've been skydiving 4 times in 4 different countries.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so I really love the adventure side of things, the adrenaline activities. I'm a big fan. So yeah, have to say those activities.
I don't know, this is kind of maybe a weird question, but you said skydiving in 4 different countries. Process differ a lot between countries? Like, did you have to do like a tandem jump every time?
Yes. So until you're a licensed skydiver, you need to do tandem jumps until you've done some kind of a certification course that can permit you to do it on your own. So every time I've had some kind of a 40-plus-year-old man strapped to my back. So to be honest, and if we get to one of our questions down the road, I think you'll hear more on this. But the reality is, yes, all 4 of my skydives, I've had a grown man strapped to my back, and well, I've been strapped to their front, I guess you could say. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, that could, oh boy. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Skydiving is something that I've recently added to my list of things I want to do, mainly because I'm terrified and I don't want to do it. But I think there are 5 people in my friend group that want to go skydiving. And so I'm like, well, if we just all go together, we may just all die together and that'll be great. So,
or better yet, none of you will, because do any of you know anyone who has? I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen. But the reality is people do this every day. And in these commercial drop zones, they know what they're doing. They do this with tourists all the time, or they do this with their friends and their family. And their lives, their lives are on the line too. And they're not going to let anything happen to you. So don't worry about it. Don't be afraid. Once you get up there and you're sitting on the edge of that plane, there's no looking back. There's no looking back. And you're going to go, and it's going to be the best thing of your life. Honestly, skydiving is what led me to my travels down the road. If I hadn't gone skydiving when I was 18, I don't know that I would have ever got on that plane to really start my 6 years of traveling.
Oh, wow.
Hands down.
Yeah, I definitely want to try it. I think about bungee jumping sometime, but like I struggle with roller coasters. I struggle with roller coasters a lot on this podcast. It's a real fear of mine. I do them, but I close my eyes the entire time. Sometimes I will cry. I don't get any enjoyment out of that process. So bungee jumping and skydiving, like, could I do it? Yes. Would I enjoy it?
Would you be really proud of yourself when you got down and glad that you did it instead of not do it? Definitely. And that's what's worth it. And maybe, you don't have to do both. Bungee jumping, don't get me wrong, a lot tougher than skydiving, but skydiving is a good once in a life. If you do have those fear concerns, which a lot of people do, skydiving is a great one to do. You can one and done, never do it again if you don't want to.
So. I want to do some like I'm a fan of ziplining, which I don't understand that because it's probably more similar to a roller coaster than skydiving. I don't know, but I do enjoy ziplining and like rappelling and like stuff like that. So I'm like, I could do that type of stuff. But I've been thinking about my Ireland trip, and I was like, I really need to do something that's a little like more adventurous. Mm-hmm. They have to do in Ireland, but I was like, it would be really fun to try to do like a hot air balloon ride or something of some sort, because I've never done that. And I like the idea of being able to like get that wide view of wherever I am, whether it's in Ireland or somewhere else. So I think I'm going to try to do a hot air balloon ride.
Very cool.
Next year. Yeah.
Highly recommend that too. That's just as enjoyable in different ways. I would recommend that as well.
What is, one thing you always wanted to do that you haven't done yet? And what do you think is holding you back from achieving that?
That's a good question. There are actually quite a few things I've got a ton of things on my bucket list. But as we were just talking about skydiving recently, one thing I've wanted to do ever since the very first time I went skydiving is get my actual skydiving license so that I can jump on my own. I would love to be able to have that license so that I can do it in different parts of the world by myself and have the skill set to be able to, take on the world skydiving. And I think the main reason, there's a couple of reasons I haven't done it yet. Part of it is that it's quite expensive. And I always think of things now in terms of how much travel can I get for that money. And so in a lot of cases, I'm like, I could live a whole month or maybe even 2 months with that kind of money. You know what I mean? So money's been part of it. The other part of it is you have to do the course all at once. And so you have to be based in one place for a certain amount of time to get through all the certifications and the money on top of that. And I think in some ways I kind of recently told myself that it would be something I have to look forward to whenever I slow down with my travels, because I know at some point I still want a home base somewhere. And I think when I have a home base, finally, I'm going to really need some adventure in my life. And I think that's going to be my prime time to say, okay, now I'm going to, I'll be based in that one area. I'll have income, which means I can justify the expense. And then get my skydiving license, and that'll be my, somewhat regular adventurous activity to keep my blood pumping and keep myself excited about life and things like that. And I'll still travel, but I don't think I'll, at some point I can't be living out of my backpack forever. Well, I could, but I don't know that I want to. So that'll be my bucket list activity to achieve once I've got to settle down somewhere.
I can totally see that for you.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's a good one too. That's I don't know if we've had anyone say get their skydiving license yet. We've had a lot of people say skydiving in general. So I think you're the first one for the license. Before we, close out completely, I do want to thank you, Geneva, for joining me today. It's been great talking to you. I enjoy every time we talk about anything, whether it's our small business struggles or travel related. It's always fantastic talking with you. And I always appreciate all of your travel knowledge that you share. Thank you so much again for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to have had this opportunity.
Where can people find you?
We got 3 main places that I'm working with here. I've got my website, unwrapyourmap.com. And that's for, a little overview of everything that I do. But really, I'm quite active on Instagram right now. I would say that's my go-to spot. So if you can find me at Instagram at unwrapyourmap. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. It's Unwrap Your Map. And on the page, I share articles and things like that occasionally. So, Instagram is a great space for sharing some content as far as visa options and what I do with Unwrap Your Map. But the Facebook page is nice because it's got some other opportunities to share extra information about these opportunities and fun articles that I come across that are travel related. So depending on what you're looking for, Facebook or Instagram is a great place to find me. And then obviously my website for just other information about what I do and things coming up. So yeah.
And I will, of course, include all of Geneva's information in the podcast episode description. So if you are interested in getting in touch with her, you can definitely hop into the description and find that information. And I also believe you are now featured on the travelcoachnetwork.com website as a travel coach option. So that's another space where people can find you.
Yes, that's correct. And I'm under the adventure travel category, which is pretty cool because obviously, my interests of skydiving, the bungee jumping, and I didn't even get to talk about wanting my motorcycle license as well, but that's okay. Next time.
You know what? That's also on my bucket list item. I want to get my motorcycle license.
Awesome. Well, there you go. We'll work on these.
Just gotta start knocking these things off the list. The world to open up so we start getting our licenses, man.
Yeah, really.
And then also, if you have enjoyed listening and hearing more about Geneva's travels and you want to hear more about her travels and get some additional travel tips, you can join us next week for an Instagram live Q&A. So keep an eye out on social media for when that will be. And you can send in any questions that you have for Geneva to funfriendspodcast@gmail.com, or you can hold them until the Instagram live and ask them. It's the perfect opportunity to get some of your travel questions answered. So keep an eye out for that. And with that, I want to say again, Geneva, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone enjoyed that. And reach out anytime, and happy travels in life. And whether you're going 5 minutes away or 5 hours away or wherever it may be, have a good time. That's what life's about. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And for everyone listening, get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. Be sure to check out the Fun with Friends podcast on social media. We are on Instagram @FunWithFriendsPodcast. You can also find us on Twitter @FunFriendsPod1. You can also reach me by email at funfriendspodcast@gmail.com. And you can go to my website, cootscreations.com, for some fun little extras from the podcast. So definitely head over there and check it out. And as always, remember to get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Goodbye.